All righty. Welcome, everybody. It is good to have you here with us. Excited that all of you are joining. I'm here with David to have some conversation about different talking points when you're traveling with Common Power to knock on doors, talking to some independents and possibly some lean Republicans. And we'll get to some techniques, some communication techniques that David will talk about around engaging with people who simply have different beliefs. How can you engage with voters? How can you be more effective at the doors? Um, and to just be upfront, David does have a hard stop at 5 because he has a lecture. Chances are most of you are also going to leave at 5 to go to his lecture. But if you have questions, we'll try to wrap up kind of this program we've got by like 4:45 or so, give or take, to have enough time for questions. And throughout, we'll have moments where you can ask questions, but I will be able to stick around longer if you want to have if you have specific questions you want to ask. With that being said, I'm gonna have David and I um, spotlight, have the two of us as on the spotlight. So that way it's a little bit easier for folks. How's this look? You doing good, David?
As good as I can.
Okay, cool. All right, let's get started. So, if you have been following some of the conversations on Slack, if you have been getting our newsletters, you have been receiving these messages by Charles, by Ben, maybe myself, by David, um, that we have been surprised over the last few weeks around the types of voters that we're engaging at the doors. So this training, the series 202 that we are launching, as a response to that kind of shock at the doors that, oh man, we're not engaging with mostly Democratic voters as we expected and communicated in the past. It seemed that the Harris strategy is that, you know what, now we have this whole bunch of folks in the electorate, some independents and lean Republicans that we can reach out to. After communicating and talking with a lot of state parties across the country, especially the 7 states that Harris has a shot at and is competing in, that is part of their strategy. That until election day, they're going to have some persuasion. So this is going to be part of their work is that they're going to do get out the vote. We are going to have conversation with Democrats as we get closer to the election day. But this concept of talking to independent, talking to some of these lean Republicans who could go our way, is not really going to go completely away, which is unusual. So this training is designed to give you some tools, some resources, so uh, you have the means to be able to communicate with the voters, regardless of where they are in that political spectrum, and how to be effective, right? So this training is to provide you with some talking points, but also very much provide you with some um, resources around just communicating with people who have a different view than you. So I would love to just dive in and have you, David, talk a little bit, if possible, about some of the best practices when you are talking to somebody, as somebody who has been studying this for decades, have decades of experience in the academic setting, but also real life examples and experiences yourself. When you're communicating with people who have very different views than you, what are some of the things that you look out for immediately?
A couple things here, Pouya, and I appreciate this chance to connect with you and with everybody. And what a great body of work the Fieldwork team is doing, preparing our folks. Just tremendous. Thank you.
Mhm.
Let me start here at the big picture. The fact that
Mhm.
we are being tasked slash asked to talk to independents and Republicans is a strategy. It's a strategy by the Harris-Walz campaign. It's their strategy. And the reason is because they have decided that they are able to reach out to the voters that are already in the Democratic camp.
Mhm.
And also Harris is busy doing a number of really strategically well thought out outreaches to folks that we would normally be knocking doors to. That's part of the beauty of a presidential campaign is they can do a lot of things that in the average campaign we work on, they're not able to do. Okay. So I think this is actually a good thing for us as an organization to kind of like recognize that in presidentials, it's possible that we'll be asked to engage more with people who aren't necessarily the base of the party, because there's more apparatus within the campaign to reach out to them. So let's start from the premise that this is a good thing. This is a really good thing. Is it harder for us? Probably. But it's really important for me mentally, when I'm going to do something difficult, to know that this is a valuable, thought out thing. Like, we're not just doing this because somehow we stumbled into this. Nope, this is a thought out approach. And tomorrow on my podcast, our podcast with CP, I'm going to talk about the specific media strategies that the Harris campaign is engaging in right now, and how it is that they're reaching out to people. So the first thing, in thinking about interacting with people who don't agree with us, it's important for us to kind of like center and ground ourselves, and to know that there is an intentionality and a strategy and a logic to what's going on here. We are being asked this for a very good set of reasons, and that increases confidence, in my view, in the campaign. I think the Harris campaign is running a tremendous campaign. They didn't even have a campaign 2.5 months ago. So I'm really glad that we're doing this. I know it's harder, but my first thing when I'm going to talk to difficult, what I will call kind of like differences, conversations across difference, not so much across racial difference, but across political difference, is to kind of let myself mentally center myself and to say, okay, there's a logic to this. So then it becomes like this mission, all right, that we're going to do. It isn't just something that is easy. It's like a task. We're climbing a mountain now. All right. And I steel myself for that. So with that in mind, I'm now prepared to go in and have these conversations. Without that kind of strengthening, without that looking in the mirror and saying, this is exactly what the assignment is, then I think it's difficult. So the first thing to do is to use the language of Gen Zers, is to say, folks, this is our assignment. This is definitively our assignment. And we can choose to not do it, or if we can't do it, that's okay. But this is the assignment. And so let's just know that when we get on those planes and we get on those trains and we get in the cars, that this is the assignment. Second, is I want to, and this is the big piece when we get into the down in the weeds part of it, is to understand what's the difference between a goal and a hope. The difference between a goal and a hope. All right. It is very, very common for people who are task oriented to get these two things confused. A goal and a hope are not the same thing. A goal is something that we can enact without anybody else necessarily blocking it. If somebody else is blocking it, we will live in a perpetual state of frustration and difficulty. If I want to get this last cookie over here, and Pouya, you are standing between me and the cookie, and I can't get to that cookie, I'm in a perpetual state of frustration if that's my only means to get the cookie. So my hope is I can get it and you're going to let me have it, but I can't control it by myself. So the goal is something that we can control. The hope is something that we hope happens, but is not under our control. All right, it's not under our control. The goal is something we can control. The hope is something that we hope comes out of the goal, but it is not ultimately under our control. All right. So with that in mind, I want to talk about this kind of difference between a goal and a hope. And I'm going to actually, it'll be really, really helpful to me if we kind of silence the chat for a bit. Okay, just for a little bit of time while you and I, Pouya, are doing this, because they keep popping up, and I'm a parent. When I get a text or a chat, I'm like, my God, are you okay? Everybody okay? All right, what's going on? All right, so that's great. I appreciate it. We'll just go like 10 or 15 minutes with just you and me, Pouya, okay? And then we'll bring everybody in. So here's the ask I have for all of you. If you don't already have a piece of paper in front of you, a notebook or just a piece of paper, please grab one. You can use your phone if you're under the age of 30. I'll allow it. But the reality is that most people, the piece of paper or a notebook or something, or a couple Post-it notes, whatever. And if I was in a classroom, I'd be using the whiteboard behind me, but I don't have that whiteboard behind me. So I'm going to ask you all to help me here. So everybody get, I do have a big piece of paper though, okay? So everybody get something to write on or something to put something that you can make notes on because visually helps a lot here, all right? So here's what I want. Excellent work, Rich, well done. So here it is, and I don't know if you can see this, but over on the far right side, this is the far right side, is something that we're gonna write, get their vote. That's on the far right side, okay, of this, get their vote. All right. And across the top of this is an arrow from left to right. And this arrow represents the conversation, the entirety of the conversation. We start the conversation over here and we end the conversation over here. And this thing is called get their vote. All right. So one more time, we're just going to show you if you're just getting your piece of paper. The conversation starts over here and it goes here. This is a pretty good conversation. It lasts a little bit of time. And then it ends right here. And we have our goal. I mean, our thing here is get their vote. Okay. Pouya, does that make sense to you?
It makes sense to me, and I got my piece of paper too,
Thank you.
ready
Thank
to
you.
go,
Thank you.
Professor Domke. Yep.
Mr. Souri, I love working with you. Great. Okay. So you see that get their vote that's on the right side, right on top of it. I want you to right above it to write hope and underline it. Hope. That's our hope. All right. That is not our goal. We cannot control that. All right. We cannot control that. That's our hope. Now, I don't probably need to show the visual too much anymore because you all got your own pieces of paper now. But just to the left of get their vote, so a little bit as you move back towards the beginning of the conversation, go in about a third, about a quarter of the way, and right under the arrow, I want you to write, mention talking points. Mention talking points. Okay. And Pouya, since you're doing this too, it's easier if like you just keep if each time you hold up what you got. Okay. So can you show what you got so far, Pouya?
Yeah, I got it on my notes actually. So it
See,
might be
classic student move. Classic
yes,
student
but
move. Okay.
I can
No,
I can
secretly,
share my
I have
screen.
it, Prof. I really do. I have it, Prof. It's all good. I just
Okay.
okay. All right.
Okay. Okay.
So right here, get their vote is our hope. Just inside that, before that is the mention the talking points. That's our goal is to get to that. Okay, is to get to that. That's something we can control. Actually, that's something we can control. My little this is Lisa would be my wife would be so checked out at this point. She'd be like, this, I don't need the teacher voice. It's fine. Okay. But go ahead, Pouya. Can you hold it up again, please?
I can. So I got my
Got to get
line
closer. Bring
through.
it up closer.
Is this good?
That's perfect right there.
All right, I got hope up top, get their vote, mention talking points.
No, hope needs to be over on the far right. Hope is referring to specifically just the last step.
I see.
Get
Okay.
their vote. The whole thing is not hope. Just the last piece is hope.
Then I gotta redraw mine.
The whole thing is the conversation. The whole thing is the conversation. So everybody, so we start the conversation. Let's imagine it's on the door. Let's imagine it's on a phone, whatever. We start the conversation. That's where the arrow starts on the far left. We have the ability to start the conversation right away with the talking points. Pouya can answer the door and he'll say yes. And I'll say, hi, I'm here to talk to you about Harris-Walz. Let me tell you some of the things that they're really good on. Or let me tell you some of the things Trump's bad on. We have the ability completely under our control once they've opened the door or answered the phone to us. We have the ability under our control. So it's a goal to go right to the talking points. We can do that. But it is the least effective thing we could do at that moment. It is the least effective thing we could do at that moment. That's why it's far over to the right. It's not as far as the hope, because the hope is beyond our control, but it's the last thing actually in the conversation. It's the last thing. So underneath the mention the talking points, somewhere on your piece of paper, put a big M. Put a big M down there. That stands for mention. Now, just quick aside, I don't say tell them. I don't say declare them. I don't say state them. I don't say recite them. I say mention, because there's a certain kind of posture we have when we're mentioning things. It's like low key. It's casual. We're just mentioning something.
Something like this, David.
Yeah, that's perfect, Pouya. That's perfect. Okay. So let's move across the conversation, and this I'll spend no more than 5 minutes, and then we'll be done on this. So we're going to start the conversation and get to the goal. You can start with the goal of mention the talking points, but I suggest it's the least valuable thing we can do. Where should we start? We should start with what I call hello. Hello. All right. The hello is the beginning of the arrow. So right underneath the beginning of the arrow is hello. I don't think any of you are not smart or anything like that. I know this is super basic stuff, but we're just trying to give a kind of little template to know, a very simple template, so that when you walk up the door, you're not even really thinking about it. You just got the template and you roll. Okay. We start with hello. And when you're talking to people that are going to disagree with us, the hello is everything. It's everything. If you walk up with a certain kind of costume on that says, hello, big time, I'm Harris-Walz, or I am anti-MAGA or fuck Trump or something like this in our kind of mentality, then the reality is that people smell this. They smell it a mile away, and they don't want anything to do with it. Especially if you're MAGA world, they are built, they like are built with resentment. So they're looking for reasons to not like you. All right. So the hello is really important. So you go up with that with no political agenda in the hello. You go up with a hi, I'm here just to make sure that there's an election going on. Or I'm here, I'm out knocking some doors with some people. Just want to say hello. Hi. Hi, Nicholas. Nice to meet you. Hello. All right. And then right next to it, you have what I call the here, H-E-A-R, here, like you're listening. These are two H's right there. Hello, and then here. Here is right after the hello. Because the way we show respect to somebody is by stopping and listening to them. So you say, hello, I'm looking on my screen. I just have you folks are kind of like across the top. Hello, Elise. How are you doing today? Stop. Let them answer. So hear that with them. Hello, Pouya, how you doing today?
Doing good. How are you?
Oh, great, man. It's a beautiful day today, isn't it? It's beautiful out here. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. So now my opening question is not, and again, this is different than just straight up talking to your own Democratic base. The opening question to me is, we're out here just reminding people that there's an election coming up. Do you know there's an election in about a month or starting in a couple weeks? That's a nonpartisan question. All right. Hey, hi. I got to see that question about how do we know their name? Well, we know their name because of the right, because of the minivan technology that we have, right?
Yep. We'll get into a little bit of the details in a second. Yeah, you can do the big picture here, David.
Yep. But I'll just use this instance to say the name is irrelevant. I don't care what their name is. I'm not there to ask them their name, because the moment you ask them their name, they want to fight you. All right. Because you have just invaded their world. And I actually feel this way when someone comes to my door. It says, hi, I'm looking for David, or I'm looking for Lisa. And my answer is not, I'm David, or Lisa's right over there. My answer is, who are you?
That's
That
actually
is,
very important, David.
But
what you mentioned about like this name thing, because I know this comes up quite often for folks who have maybe never canvassed. Because on your minivan, on the application itself that you're using to navigate which door to go to, the names are right there. And often a lot of folks open up with, "Hello, my name is X. I'm looking for David Domke. Is it home?" And I think to me personally as well, like, I was like, "Who are you? Why do you know my name?" Like immediately, those
exactly,
are the questions that come to my mind as well, right? If somebody comes to my door, say like, "I'm looking for this person," I'm like, "How do you know I live in this apartment?" Right? So yes, eventually you want to make sure you get the right information about the right person. And once the conversation goes on, you can be like, "Hey, by the way, you're Mr. Domke, right?" And then you can be like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm David." Right? Once you build that connections, right, David? Build that kind of trust within the conversation.
totally. So the beginning of the conversation are two H's. Put a big H
Mhm,
underneath there. Two things: hello and hear. Hear them. Listen to them. Hear them.
mhm,
So you got a big H. It's two H's actually, but a big H, and you got an M. So in the middle, we're going to put an A, and this is going to be the ham technique. Okay, the ham technique. Um, the A is we're going to ask them a couple questions. It's part of the hearing still, but it is more engaging than just listening. It is actually responding and building something between the person and you. So it's asking. So the first question you ask is, so do you know, we're out here just saying, do you know that there's an election coming up? All right. And they usually in their answer to that question, they will tell you an awful lot. If they don't know there's an election coming up, then we're really happy, actually. We're really happy. We're
mhm,
like, awesome, awesome. You get to to talk to them and tell them whatever you want to tell them. But most of the time, they're not going to say that. They do. I was in Portland, South Portland, a day and a half ago with some of our team, and we had a couple people who didn't know there was an election coming up. All right, that will happen. But most of the time, they're not going to say that. Most of the time, they're going to tell you something else, like "I sure do, motherfucker," or something like this. They're going to tell you something right off the bat, or they're going to say "I
mhm,
sure do," and and I'm excited or I'm scared or whatever. You see, we're not to the talking points yet, folks. We are
mhm,
not to the talking points yet. If you go right to the talking points, you got no shot whatsoever. Like I could agree, you could come to my door and be like, Harris-Walz, decked out in Harris-Walz, come to my door and go straight to the talking points. And I still might be a little bothered by the fact that you didn't take a minute to like make me feel comfortable. You've invaded my space. You've come into my door. All right. You are at my door. So the A in the middle is ask. Ask a couple questions. Do you know there's an election? Have you decided who you're going to vote for? Again, these are not asking them. You're not talking points. Have you decided you're going to vote for? Did you have any questions? Anything you're kind of been thinking about that you've been wondering? This all takes a minute or two in a good conversation. You're just talking to them. H and A. You're just hanging out, talking. And then at that point, there's a connection, and you can say, you know, I'd like to just mention, and that's why I use the word mention. I'd like to just mention that on immigration, actually, Donald Trump killed the bill. Donald Trump absolutely killed the bill that Kamala Harris is going to sign. And did you know that that bill was passed by some of the most conservative members of the U.S. Congress? So I understand that you might be for Donald Trump, but I just want to mention that. That's all. All right. And now you're done. You're done. And you say, thank you so much for your time. And you again respect them on the way out, just like you respected them on the way in, and you're done. So you you say hello and you hear them, you ask them a couple questions, and then you mention a talking point or two usually based upon something they've said in those asks.
mhm.
About reproduction. Yeah, I'm really worried about women's rights. Oh, really? That's awesome. Okay. Well, did you know that Kamala Harris has been working on behalf of reproductive rights for 30 years? Okay. Or did you know that Donald Trump wants to institute a national abortion ban? And they may well want this. That's okay. That's why it's out of your control that you're going to get their vote. They may well want this. So, Pouya, I'm going to stop there. It's ham. It's hello and here, ask, and then mention. The last thing under our control is the mention. We have the hope that we're going to get their vote, but we never really know. That has to be left to the universe. We have to believe that's there. Okay. So that's what I come to say. Take the pressure off ourselves. We do not have control about getting their vote. We do not. What we have control about is how we interact with the person. That's what we have control over. And in that respect, that's how I deal with the kind of pressure of a difficult mountain to climb. I can't climb that mountain. I can't guarantee we're going to get their vote. You know, all I can know is how I'm going to show up, and I'm going to treat them with respect. And I might, and I hope, and I'm going to get to the talking points if I get any opportunity at all. But the most important thing is to just connect with them. I'll finish here. So there is an absolute truism in all communications that people don't generally remember most of what you tell them. They don't. They don't remember most of what you tell them, but they always remember how you made them feel. And what you are as a representative, what we are as a representative of the Harris-Walz or Tester or Brown campaign. And so at the end of the day, we just want them to feel respected by this campaign. That's what we're doing. If we do that, then we actually have made a significant dent in their possibility to vote for the candidate, because now they're like, you know, those people treated me with respect.
Yeah. That the respect thing, David, like personally, I was in Pennsylvania 2 weeks ago, knocking on doors we literally had like Trump ban signs at the doors, right? Knowing that yes, there's a very good chance that he might be voting for Trump, but there are other candidates that I'm still campaigning for. And that's what it was. I was not going to the doors trying to argue why are you voting for Trump, right? Or even mentioning Harris. I'm like, okay, your mind is made up on this one. Let's talk about another candidate, right? Um, and I think you'll be surprised as well how respectful the conversation can be with somebody that you may be watching the news feel like, man, they're coming out to get me. As a liberal, as a Democrat,
Yeah,
talking
right.
to somebody who is a super Trump supporter who has a flag in their, it's Make America Great flag at their house, that conversation is going to go very poorly, or it's going to be very frustrating. I think it's actually very personally satisfying for me to go through the door and be like, you know what? I was able, even though politically I disagree with this person very much so, I can give them the respect and I can receive a lot of respect as well.
Yeah. So just think about a thing that all of us think about one thing in anyone's life. And there's 200, 130 plus people on this call. That's something that you have changed your mind about over time. You have changed
Mhm.
your mind about over time. It could be, any one of us has got something in our lives about some person, like we thought they were not great and now we think they're terrific. Or it could be about an issue, like I used to think this and now I think this. All right. We didn't change our minds because someone walked up to us and gave us a set of talking points. It's not the way the world works. The way the world works is it's incremental through us having the door opened by just having a conversation. So we're there to help that door open. If it's not open, to open it a tad, just by respecting them. If it's open a tad, to open it up a little bit more. All right. If the world changed when you gave people talking points, then we would be able to change everybody's mind who doesn't believe global warming is happening. All right. It doesn't work that way. So the talking points are just mentions. They're the last thing we deliver. The first thing is the respect and the asking. And when you deliver, and those are under your control, even if they're an idiot to you, those are under your control. So Pouya, I'm going to guess people probably do want some specific, like things
Mhm.
to say about different issues, right?
Yeah, and I think we can maybe address a few questions because they're a little bit more general before we get into the talking points. Uh, Maybe a handful of those that are more likely to come up. But before we do that, David, something you mentioned that's I want to just reiterate for folks who might be a little bit more new to canvassing. This point about being very prepared and trying to know everything. As David mentioned, like this whole mentioning the talking points, you're lucky if it actually comes up. Like it must be a very good conversation for you to be able to get to the mentioning the talking point. So if you're canvassing for a candidate that you're not familiar with, maybe you're like, hey, I really don't know all the policies that they believe in, every, how they vote on all these issues. The simple answer is that you don't need to know. You simply don't. If you know two, three, four things about them, that's enough. And you will get every single time you travel with Common Power, you will get those basics. So
Yeah.
if you're worried that like, oh my God, what if they ask me about this very specific question on this policy point? Man, it is not happening. I've knocked on thousands of doors. I've never once have been asked by a voter, hey, does Sherrod Brown believe on, the specific policy that was in this bill that people voted no on? Like, never happens. I wish people were this politically active that they know all these policy points on every single candidate.
Yeah.
So, quick things about that. I think I'm just reading through the chat, David, or the message in the chat. A few things that are a little bit coming
Yep.
up, they're recurring is um, people are asking about filling out the minivan. Um, please make sure that you do still fill out minivan. That is super important for the campaigns. We did not mention it here around like how you use the minivan because there are different trainings that you can have with us and also on the ground. You always want to fill out the minivan as best and as accurately as you can, but you are by no means instructed to follow the script on the minivan word by word. It would actually sound very, very robotic and horrible if somebody came to your door and you were actually reading off of the minivan script. So what you want to do is before you actually knock on your first door, read through the script, see what are the specific questions the campaign is trying to get out or the specific information the campaign is trying to get from these voters. And based off of that, you can have the questions that we're going to ask them kind of rotated around the information the campaign is looking for.
And
Most often,
yeah, keep
oh,
going.
go ahead.
Keep going. No,
Yeah,
go
and
ahead.
most often than not, the questions that they're going to have is this voter going to vote for the candidates? So that's essentially you want to see if the voter is going to vote support the candidate you're canvassing for. And maybe sometimes, what are the issues that the voter specifically cares about? Those are usually the questions you're going to get on the event, but it's still filled out. Go ahead, David.
I've been watching questions come through the chat. Most of what I've seen are things that you're going to get told about when you're there before you go out, right? So this particular Zoom session, not that useful to kind of dive into those weeds because the people who train you will get you exactly ready when you walk out that door. All right. There might be things on your mind, like what do you do if you see a dog? All right. Or what do you do if like somebody is mean to you? These are real things. But this particular Zoom session isn't going to be a good usage of our time. The best usage of our time is going to be talking about specifically how you generally deal with people who disagree with you.
Yeah.
So many of the things that people are asking that I'm seeing going through chat are things that you will get explained to you when you get there. No worries.
Yeah. I think there's one question that we can just quickly touch on is when the door opens, do you recommend with hi saying your name right off the bat? I would say so, yeah. I want to specifically tell them who I am. I'll be like, hi, I'm Pouya. Just trying to talk to you about the election coming up. How are you doing today?
Yeah. So this is great. I'm glad you said that, Pouya.
Yeah.
So look, I'm a guy, I'm a white guy, I'm 6 foot tall. I'm a threat at the door. All right. I'm a threat. That is just a factual truth in the world today. However you show up at the door, though, you are also a threat. All right. Because we have come into their space. We've come into their world. So it's really important to show with the utmost respect. I put on, having gone to the American South hundreds of times, I put on the kind of way that I've learned to interact with people in the American South, which is with the utmost kind of respect. So what's it look like? It's a step back from the door, put my hand over my heart, say, hi, I'm David. I'm here just in the neighborhood with some people, and we're just seeing if people are out, know there's an election coming up. Right there. That's it. I don't ask them their name, nothing. I tell them who I am. I'm David. I'm out here in the neighborhood, just knocking doors to make sure that people know there's an election coming up. If we start with asking them their name without giving them our name, that is so offensive. All right. That is just really offensive to them. So
Mhm.
I would just start with your name and what you're doing. I'm out knocking doors, checking in to see if people are going to vote in this election. I'm not knocking doors to try to get you to vote for Harris-Walz. That's not how you open up, right? I'm
Mhm.
just out here just checking to make sure there's an election.
And
So
just to clarify that, David, like this is really applying to independents and lean Republicans. Like if you are at a door and somebody has this big Harris-Walz sign and you're campaigning for Harris-Walz, great. Go open very enthusiastically. Yay. Thanks for being a voter. Like you can create that energy for yourself, for the person at the door. We're really talking about folks that you're like, man, I don't know where they really land. Maybe on your minivan, it says that they're registered Republican or registered independent. Just to clarify for folks, once again, this is really talking to people who are really not on our side or we're not sure about.
yep,
Yeah. So let's get to the talking points. And then I know because you have to leave, David, I can stay on the call and answer some of the specific questions folks may have.
okay,
How does that sound? All right.
yeah,
So some of the issues that have been coming up, David, at the doors, and we have been hearing over the last 3 weeks are the ones that you probably expect is the economy, is immigration, reproductive rights. And those are usually the conversation that we have at the doors. But specific with folks who are on the other ideological side is usually the economy and immigration.
sure,
Um, yeah, when we're talking at the doors, let's say we hear them out, we ask the questions, and we see a window of opportunity where they mention something where I'm like, perfect opportunity for me to mention something along the sides of, hey, here's a position that Harris has or Harris-Walz campaign has on this topic. Can you give us a couple for immigration and the economy?
sure. And Pouya, you and I and Ben and Charles have been just have a little Google Doc.
Mm-hmm.
Is that can we share that with people later on, like with all our volunteers or whatever?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
we can do that.
so uh, I don't really think that more than one talking point is needed for any issue. It's not. It's not. So let's start with immigration.
Mm-hmm.
The standard kind of viewpoint of people who are in MAGA world or on the Republican side is that Harris has opened the borders up and has encouraged tons of, I'll use their language, illegals to come across the border. And they're going to say that. They're going to say it even worse than that sometimes. They're going to say it even worse than that. All right. And so the one thing to say to them is first of all, um, any concerns that first of all, you hear them. So that's back to the H. You hear them. You say, I hear what you're saying. Just take that phrase right there. Use it every single time. I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. So you hear them. You got to hear them. And then I would say to them, actually, any concerns that we have about the border right now are because Donald Trump refused to support the bill that the Congress passed. All right. So whatever you think about Harris on this, it is Trump, and he has been called out by fellow Republicans for killing the border bill. All right. So anything that you are upset about, it's because he didn't want to pass this bill, which is the toughest, strongest bill we've had on immigration in decades. Now, that may not be something any of you really actually want to talk about because it's about tough on the border, and it sounds a little lack of compassionate. But the reality is that we're not there to necessarily go unpack values after values. That's not what we're there to do. Our hope, again, is to get their vote, right?
Mhm.
Our hope is not to get them to accept the doxology of progressives, okay? We're there to try to get their vote. So the simplest way is to let them know, first of all, Trump killed this bill. Trump stopped this bill. And he has been criticized by the most conservative Republicans for doing that. So any concerns that I hear what you're saying about the border, but that's on Trump. That's not on Harris. All right. It's not on Harris. The second thing I would say, if I'm going to get asked, is that Harris has been prosecuting transnational criminal gangs for decades. And she has a strong record on stopping the kind of across the border violence, trafficking, drugs, and humans that we all want to stop. We all want to stop that. All right. So she
Real
has a
quick here.
history of that.
Yeah, I think David, what you mentioned here is like we all want that. Like that's a language to adopt as well. Is that like as much as you may disagree with the language a voter might be using, for example, you brought up maybe somebody who cares about immigration, they're concerned about it. They might say illegals are coming through. That is not our place to be like, well, actually, you're supposed to say undocumented. Like that will immediately get this like, yes, like you can model it to be like, yes, it is a concern that maybe a lot of undocumented people are coming through and maybe we can have a better immigration system. So you can turn it, you can model it, you can ask a question, right? To your point, David, is like, yeah, what is it about the immigration like system that you specifically want to see change? And maybe they're like, oh, I want to see X, Y, Z. I'll be like, oh, funny enough, that was in the bill that was supposed to be passed that
That's
Donald
where
Trump
the
stopped
ask,
it.
right? The ask
Right.
gets you that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay, so now look, our hope is that we're going to get their vote. Do not at any point in time ever expect that someone's going to stop and like just smile at you and say, thank you. Thank you for coming to my door and for enlightening me. Thank you. That's
Mm-hmm.
never going to happen. All right? It's never going to happen. So just wipe it away from your fictitious world. It's not going to happen. So those are the two things I would say about immigration. Trump killed the border bill that should be in law right now. It's him. It's him. It's the dude that you want to vote for. All right. It's him.
Mm-hmm.
And second, Harris was, Attorney General of the state of California. They have a significant border with the country of Mexico. She has been prosecuting all the kinds of things that we don't want coming across that border for decades. She has a record on this. All right.
Mm-hmm.
That may or may not make any dent whatsoever, but you've done your job. You've done your job. Okay, how about for the economy? For the economy, people will say, look, things are way too expensive, right? Things are way too gas. You look at gas, look at what it costs me to go to if I get to go to the movies or to pay for groceries. Where do we start? We start with the H. If we were in a classroom right now and we were all in each other's physical presence, I would stop and I would say, now all together now, which letter do we start with? And I would want you all to yell in unison, H. Okay, we hear. So Pouya, I'll be the door knocker, and you just show them. I'll be the one that's tough on the economy, and you just show the hearing. Okay, you be the door knocker. I'm the person there.
Okay. Hey, I'm out here knocking on doors. I'm Pouya, trying to see if you're aware of the election coming up today.
Yeah, yeah. What do you? Yeah. I am.
Yeah. So I just want to hear some of the issues that you might be caring about, that is encouraging you to go out there and vote in this election.
Look, man, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I'm barely making it. I'm working 3 jobs. My wife has a part-time job. We have 3 kids. It's really, really tough. This has got to change. I can't keep doing this. We can't keep doing this.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm sorry that you have to work 3 jobs to just meet your needs. I'm really sorry to hear that. That's definitely challenging.
See, folks, stop right there. That's exactly it right there. That is it right there. That is it. You have respected me. I feel heard, and you have disarmed me, is what you've done. You've just disarmed me. Because if you don't acknowledge that you've heard me, then I'm really mad at you right now.
Mhm.
Okay. So economy, what would I say? if I get to the M, I don't start with the M though. I start with the I hear you and a couple asks. But if I get to the M, what are the mentions I'm saying? The first mention I'm saying is that since COVID, the United States has the best economic recovery in the world. All right. It has the best economic recovery in the world. That is just the case. All right. This is after I've heard, though, I have to first have heard that they have said things are really tough. If you do not say, I hear you, we have disrespected them. So I hear you. Yeah, it's tough. Man, I can't stand. Look, I'm going to be honest with all of you. I don't like buying gas at $5 a gallon. I don't like doing that. So I can empathize. Find the empathy. Find it. And then the talking point, the mention, best recovery in the world. And then a second thing is Kamala Harris wants to give everybody under $400,000 a tax cut. Okay. Donald Trump wants to give everybody who's making over 100 million a tax cut. Now, let me just be honest with y'all. I don't know if those numbers are right. I don't know if they're right. I can look it up in a heartbeat, but in the larger truth of it all, they're true. They're true. In the larger context, it's true. And so I really believe in communication that we're going for the general truth, not the specific truth when we're talking across lines. Okay. Does Harris want to help the working class? She does. Does Trump want to make the richer richer? He does. It doesn't matter if it's 100 million or 150 million. What do you think? You think that's going to be the thing that moves them? Is that it's 100 million and not 150 million? No. So the first two things I say is the best recovery in the world since COVID. We got a long way to go. We got a long way to go, but it's the best recovery. And then second, I don't know how much you're making, but you got 3 jobs, 3.5 jobs in your family. And Kamala Harris wants to give everybody who's making under 400,000 a tax cut. And Donald Trump wants to give everybody who earns over 150 million a tax cut. That matters to me. Matters to me. May not matter to you. Matters to me. Those two things are going to get you. That's plenty right there in the economy. Plenty.
Yeah, thanks, David. And just to make sure folks are aware, like we will share the doc that David mentioned. We will send it out to all of you, put it in Slack, email, all of those. It's about like actual listening to people as well, right? Like if somebody's talking about like, hey, I work in 3 jobs, to be like, well, US had the best recovery among all the developed nations in the world. I'll be like, well, it's not impacting me. I'm still working 3 jobs, right? Like you got to be
Exactly.
specific as well,
Yep.
right? There's like you can't just take all these talking points and be like, well, I'm just gonna repeat them. But I'm like, you know what? This is my opportunity. So like, let me ask you a question. Maybe I'm in Pennsylvania. Maybe they're like, hey, I'm working as a educator. I'll be like, hey, are you in a union by any chance? I'll be like, yeah. I'll be like, okay, great. Then that's my opportunity. And that's the thing is that like you don't need to know all of the talking points. It's not useful to be able to say like, I have memorized 50 talking points for Harris-Walz in my head, and now I can pull them up. It's like in the moment, based on what they're sharing with you, you have enough information. Y'all have listened to enough Kamala and Tim Walz speeches at this point that their talking points, what they're saying. You are probably watching their ads on YouTube coming up on television. You know what the issues are that they're talking about, what are some of their general policies, right? So it's not specific that like down to the cent trying to get every detail right, as David mentioned. It's about the general aspect of it. They're like, oh, you're in the union? Great. So, well, they're endorsing Kamala Harris. This is what her stance is on unions. And this is Donald Trump's. And it can be a quick pitch, right? 15, 20 seconds. It's not going to be a long conversation that you need to know a lot of details about.
Yeah, let me finish up and then I got to go to my lecture. Sandra put it, I think Sandra's got a better talking point than the recovery. Hers is about tariffs. Okay. Say Trump wants to impose roughly a 20% tariff on all these goods. What does that mean? Because no one knows what a tariff is. What does that mean? It means that companies outside this country are going to have to pay money to get their products into our country. And that dollar cost is going to be passed along to you. All right.
Mm-hmm.
You like any eggs? You like food that's made from outside the country? Bananas?
Mm-hmm.
All right. This stuff is going to cost you more. Stuff for your car, it's going to cost you more. Everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Trump tax. Sandra, I think that's really good. It's really, really good. It's very simple for people to understand that other countries are going to have to, and companies are going to have to pay more to get their products into our country, and we're going to pay that cost. All right. So two other issues I want to talk about, and they're super easy, are abortion and healthcare. Okay. On abortion rights, these are winning issues for the Democrats, both of them. They're super easy. That doesn't mean that folks are going to vote for Harris-Walz. They still might be voting for Trump. In fact, probably most of these people are. But on reproductive rights, if they are open to pro-choice, then the simple thing is that Donald Trump really wants to impose a national abortion ban. He does. He wants to impose that. And Harris wants to maintain the Roe v. Wade standards that have been in existence for 50 plus years in this country. All right. That's it. That's all that needs to be said. If they want to impose that national abortion ban, then really that's beyond your control. That's not what you can control. You can control the mention. You can't control you're going to get their vote. So the only talking point that I need to know is Harris wants to restore the Roe v. Wade law, and Trump wants to impose a national abortion ban. That's all that needs to be done. If anybody wants to know even more, Trump also wants to wipe out contraception. Okay? Wants to get rid of it. On healthcare, again, it's very simple. Harris wants to continue the Affordable Care Act, which provides protection for pre-existing conditions for Americans all over the country. And Trump has been trying to kill the Affordable Care Act since 2016. Okay? Once he's been trying to do it since 2016. He's already said he's going to try to do it again. So Harris wants to continue this really outstanding, it's quite reasonably unpopular in this country policy, and Trump wants to kill it. And he's tried to kill it. He would have killed it had McCain and Collins and Murkowski voted for it. There's only one M in ham. There's two H's and one M. So it's ham. Okay. It's hello, hear, ask, mention. And if you just approach it that way, you're like, you can walk away and you go, well, that didn't fucking go well. All right. Or that went well. But it's all becomes like this little thing that's outside of you. All you're trying to do is apply a strategy to win a vote. And whether you win or not is not entirely under your control. What's under your control is the ham.
Yep. That's awesome. I know you gotta go, David, because your lecture is starting in like 3 minutes. But I'm gonna stick around. So if folks have questions, please put them in the chat or just raise your hand on Zoom. Thank you, David. That was essentially, we sat in your classroom, essentially your virtual classroom for like 30, 45 minutes. Appreciate the insight and the lesson.
The most important thing is the work that you all are doing. Oh, that's nice. Thank you all. But really, what you're doing is the work. Okay. It's the least I can do to come and just give you a couple minutes about communication tutorials. Look, we're not going to get a lot of these votes. You're not going to get almost all of them. But you might move them along continuum where they're like, well, I'm going to consider it when their daughter comes along and says something to them about abortion rights. Because she's got more power than you in that dynamic. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Right.
See ya.
Thank you. All right. Yeah. Please feel free to raise your hand, and I'm going to remove the spotlight. And yeah, fire away. Any questions you got around what we shared, or if you have a little bit more specific questions that you want to ask about Canvas and generally best practices, more than happy to answer them as well. Tom, I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead. I think you're on mute.
We're unmuting.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Great job. I just wanted to ask, I was writing furiously to get down the ham strategies for those issues. Brilliant. I hated it at first and I'm loving it now. And I'm wondering if there are other issues that come up, and in particular, I'm going to Arizona, so they're going to tell me what the issue you're in Pennsylvania, et cetera. So is that Google Doc that you were talking about going to perhaps address other issues with a talking point or two?
Yeah, so the Google Doc has about like 4 or 5 like top issues that usually come up that we just talked about right here on the call. That's a good place, right? It's a good one pager that you can just have as a resource. But I would say when you travel with us that first day on that Saturday morning, you will get talking points specifically about the candidates because we're not only talking about Harris-Walz, and that Google Doc we will share is only about Harris-Walz. So if you're going to Arizona, Ruben Gallego is going to be, for example, another person, right? So you'll get specific talking points for candidates. And I think that's actually more helpful in the moment getting those talking points from your team leads.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. All right. I see Dan, you got your hand up.
Can you hear me?
Can you
So,
hear me?
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
My question, oh, is it a different Dan?
No, it's not.
Oh,
You're
you
right.
can.
My
Here you go.
question is how to deal with someone who gives you a response that is just not true.
Mm,
I don't, I mean, because like, for instance, Vance said Trump strengthened the Affordable Care Act. And of course,
mhm.
that's not true. I mean, maybe he did. I don't know, but he certainly also tried to kill it like 60 times. So how do you
Yeah.
respond when someone quotes something that's just false?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's about like how false of a statement is it, right? So if it's like slightly inaccurate, I can be like, well, I've heard that XYZ has happened actually, and maybe you can take a look at it. But if it's something like very extreme, like we know that Donald Trump has tried to kill the Affordable Care Act, and if somebody's like adamant that like, nope, Trump actually strengthened it, you can mention that like in 2017 he actually brought up a case, I mean a legislation to kill, and John McCain famously went on the Senate floor and saved the Affordable Care Act in 2017. That's all you can really say. Like if beyond that they're trying to argue with you, that's the door that you can just move on from. Because that at that point you're like, well, no matter how many questions I asked, however many things I mentioned, that person is not going to really change their mind. But if they're like, oh, really? Like I didn't know that, because it could be that they're just misinformed, right? Through social media and other platforms. But if they're open to it and they're like, oh, I will look into it, or they're willing to listen, great. That's awesome. You have moved the needle a little bit. But if they're trying to get into some sort of argument with you that like, no, in fact, he did this, that, I'm like, well, yeah, maybe I will look into those. Thanks for letting me know. I hope you have a great rest of your day and kind of move on, because that's the door that you're not really gonna change your mind. Yeah.
Thank you.
hmm I see the other Dan. You have your hand up, Dan Kent. I think you're on mute.
Off mute now, I hope.
hmm
Okay. So in that situation, the Trump-Walz conversation isn't going to go any further. They've locked in on something that you just know it's false, and you're just headed down an argumentative road if you keep going
Yeah.
at the Trump-Walz level. But you're in Pennsylvania or Arizona with really important Senate races underneath that. And
Yeah.
those of us who were in Montana were coached on the Saturday morning when we get started that Trump-Walz was just a lightning rod in Montana. So
Yeah.
don't talk about the national presidential level, talk about the Senate level, and see if they are intelligent ticket crossers. So firmly
Yeah.
Trump, but they recognize how toxic Kari Lake is for Arizona. They're going to cross over, or maybe they're on the fence and they might not cross over. And so abandoning the Trump-Walz level conversation, which is getting into conflict, say, move on and say, well, what are you thinking about the Senate race? And what are you thinking about the superintendent of public instruction race?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
woman
And
wants, then
that's
you
a very
maybe
good.
get some common ground and end with a more successful feeling about that door.
Yeah, and I think a good practice, if you're canvassing with CP, chances are that you're going to be canvassing for some folks further down the ballot as well, compared to like if we're in the state that Harris-Walz is on the ticket and we're campaigning for, there will be somebody else as well. And I would actually suggest to start with them. Because if you're going to a door and you're trying to connect with this voter and you're like, you know what, they're independent or maybe they're leaning Republican, there's signs, whether on your minivan or there's physical signs that you're like, chances are they're really not going to vote for Harris. Don't even try to mention Harris, right? It's like, you know what? I'm in Montana. I'm not even campaigning for Harris. I'm not going to even mention. But maybe I'm in Arizona this weekend. I go to a door that have a Trump sign. I'm not going to go and be like, hey, let me try to see if I can change this person's mind. I'll be like, hey, go through the ham, go through the hello, here, ask. And when I get to the point where I can say something, I'll be like, hey, how about Ruben Gallego? I'm not going to even mention Harris because I'm like, hey, if you got a Trump sign in your yard, my 2 cents is not going to really change your mind. If you went out of your way paying $20, $30 to put a yard sign in your, for Trump events. So I would say actually starting down ballot and see like, oh, they responded really well to Ruben Gallego. And there's no big sign that they're a huge Trump MAGA person. I'll be like, how does Harris make you feel? What do you think of Kamala Harris? And then we can maybe have a conversation about that. So thanks for bringing that up, Dan. I see Leslie, you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Pouya. I found that really helpful. The question I had was, at what point did you actually ask them if they are that person on minivan that you want to know if that's them? Because I had a couple of situations where I went to the door and the person didn't even know whether they were registered to vote, and they weren't the person on the minivan. But so we gave them information about how to register to vote. But I wondered, like, just listening to what you and David are saying, we were in southern Washington, and so we're in a rural area where it wasn't like the rest of Washington, and so we came across a lot of people that were probably conservatives, and I just wondered, given your lecture today, like when you would actually ask them those questions, or would you even ask them those questions?
Yeah, so I think it's about like when you are on your minivan, there's some, data points that you can probably guess if this is the right person you're talking to, right? Like it usually have the age of the person, and their gender about like if they're a male or female. Those are usually the two things that I look at. So like right off the bat, like if I'm looking for, I don't know, Emily, 22-year-old female, and then this, 60-something-year-old man comes up to the door, I'll be like, well, that's definitely not Emily, right? I'll still engage with the person, have a conversation, but once I get to my minivan, I'm still going to mark Emily not home because I was not actually conversing with Emily. But if I'm actually like looking for John, I don't know, 42-year-old male, and somebody comes to the door, I'm like, well, this could be John, if I'm having a conversation and I'm like, I'm getting somewhere with this, and I'm like, hey, just to confirm, I'm looking for Mr. John, whatever. And they're like, yeah. So I would say once you feel like you have built some trust in the conversation, bring it up because you still want to make sure you're talking to the right person and you're not giving the wrong information to the campaign. So if
Okay.
I'm at the door, get through the hello, how are you? Talking about the election, and they're like, okay, yeah, I'm voting for this person. And I'm like, well, thank you so much if they're on our side. Just to confirm, you're Mr. X, and they're like, yes. And if not, maybe I'll go through some of the mentions of like Harris has done this, Gallego has done that, and then maybe ask them the question of, hey, just to confirm, I was talking to Mr. or Miss, for example, whatever.
Okay, that's helpful. And just a quick follow-up question. Would there ever be a situation where you'd actually ask them if who they're voting for, or if they'd care to share that? And
Yeah,
you would. Okay.
yeah, I think. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I think after like you get through the basics of hello, how are you? How's your day? And you maybe ask them like, hey, are you aware that their election is like 2 weeks away? Do you have a plan to vote? If they're like, oh yeah, I'm definitely voting. I think like if you have like there are really no clues for you to tell like which way they're leaning, it is totally okay to be like, do you mind if I ask which way you're leaning? Maybe I don't know, if you're really just campaigning for Harris, you can be like, which way are you leaning on the presidential election? But if there are some down ballot, as I said, mention, start with them. Be like, hey, have you heard of, for example, Ashley Ehal? She's running for Congress. How do you feel about her? She's a Democrat. She's doing X, Y, Z a little bit. And if they're open to it, then be like, oh, great, that's awesome that you're open to considering her. How about Kamala Harris and Trump? Like, how are you feeling about that election? So it is totally okay to still ask them, as long as you're like, yep, I feel okay to ask these questions.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
And about 70% of the time, you'll know just from the here conversations,
Yep.
what their leanings are will come out very quickly, very easily. And if
Exactly.
you're doing a lot of good H&A, you'll have their respect as they tell you that they're thinking Trump.
Yeah, that's been
Yep.
my experience in the past when I've canvassed in previous years. But this particular community I was in, I was asking, and it was shut down completely. Like I wasn't really getting anywhere in terms of which way they were leaning or like
Mhm.
at all. So this is helpful. At least I'm learning a few ins to the conversation. And at the end of the canvassing day, I thought, wow, well, I didn't do a very good job today. I need some other techniques because
Mhm.
it was under lock and key.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
yeah, I definitely hear you. Yep.
we got run off a few doors. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry about that.
knowing when to retreat is part of the job.
Yeah, and I see Sally just put a quick question in the chat. I'll answer that real quick. Any thoughts on engaging with the person who's clearly annoyed that you're standing at their door? I think it kind of varies. Like, why are they annoyed? Are they annoyed because I woke them up from a nap or something? Then I'm like not gonna hold them at the door, right? I'll be like, very quick, reminding you about the election. Here's a piece of literature, take a look. But if they're annoyed that I'm campaigning for the Democrats and I can clearly read that, I'll be like, you know what? And they're really not happy that I'm there and they're telling me that, they want me there, then great. Have a good day. Thanks for your time. I'll move on. I think it kind of varies. You kind of have to read the context of the situation. Stephen, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question to that last discussion. What
Mhm.
about in that conversation where we get around to saying we want to confirm your name is John, but our minivan wants us to look at Emily? At what point do we say, well, is Emily home, or can I talk to Emily? No, we didn't address that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there are a few things to consider. The first one is what kind of voter you're getting at the door. So let's say I have a conversation with John and he is very enthusiastic about the election and he's like, oh, I love Kamala Harris. I would feel pretty okay to be like, oh, great. On my list, I have Emily. Do you know by any chance if she's voting? And, do you mind reminding her about the election? And they're like, chances are that they'd be like, oh, yeah, that's my daughter. I'll definitely make sure that she's voting as well. But if the father, for example, or the mom, for example, comes to the door and they're a Republican, I'm not going to even mention Emily because I don't want to come out her because their ballot is private and maybe the parents don't know, right? Um, there is a very, very high likelihood that you might be looking for, if you're in the suburbs, a lot of moms who are in their like 40s, 50s, and you might get the husband at the door who's a Republican, but the wife is a Democrat. So go to every door, even if there's a Trump sign, still go to the door because you may not be reaching out to the voter. I should put a backyard sign. So go to the door, try to converse with people, and if you get a good read on, hey, yeah, I can ask for this other person, they're voting, great, go for it. But if you're like, hey, I don't feel great about this, they don't really might not match up, I don't even mention it.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah. Rebecca and then Tom.
Hi, thank you. This is an awesome meeting. When I was in Phoenix, one thing I learned, well, I observed, and then I asked a question about it, and they gave me an answer that made sense. I was in a neighborhood, it was houses, so not apartments, but houses, very neighborly. And people were very, like, you could not tell. It was like, and I was like, but the one thing I could tell is don't do a direct ask, like, who are you voting for? And I didn't, but it occurred to me later and someone said, it's pretty contentious these days and neighbors may not want their neighbors to know who they're voting for. And so people really held that information close to the vest. And I will say that once I started down ballot and once went up, and once I got through, if they were Harris-Walz they'd almost always like, I'm voting for, you know, they'd almost deliver the information. So, but it was helpful for me to kind of know, like, oh, that may be one reason why.
Uh-oh, what happened?
Oh, I think she fell off the call. But I think we get the gist of it. Yes, at times it can be very challenging to read and people might not be sharing. Especially if you maybe going to the Midwest, you might get a lot of Midwestern nice people at the doors who are like, yep, we know exactly who we're voting for. Thanks for stopping by. You know, they're not really going to share who they're voting for, and that's okay. It is people's absolute right to keep that private information to themselves. But you can ask other questions, right, to maybe get a read, like maybe some of the issues that you care about, like, oh, it's the economy. What aspect of the economy? Oh, well, you know, this is happening, or like reproductive rights or abortion. Where do you stand on that if you don't mind sharing? And if based off of that answer, chances are you can pretty much tell where they stand on, for example, Harris-Walz. So you can ask other questions that might give you a little bit more insight and have a conversation with people. Tom, I think you had your hand up still.
Yeah, thank you. A question is about lit dropping. And in the situation where we're going to the house of somebody who's a independent or leaning Republican or that sort of thing, our target, what's the policy on lit drop? Both if a person answers the door, but also if they don't answer the door.
Yeah, I would say if you're reaching out to voters and they do not come to the door, still leave a piece of literature at their door. Especially because we're going to swing states, people are very much used to having that kind of like piece of literature, even if they're not voting for that person or if they're independents, lean Republicans, because they're probably getting the literature for Republicans as well. So leave the literature, do not put it in the mailbox. That is a felony. Just FYI, always put it next to the door handle or something like that. But if they're at a door, you're like, hey, have you heard of this candidate starting down ballot? And they're like, oh, no, I haven't actually. Tell me about them. Quick pitch, hey, this is an Army veteran. Ashley is also is an Army veteran. She has done this, she has done that. How does that sound? And they're like, yeah, that sounds great. I'll be like, hey, do you want a little bit more information to read up on her? And if they're open to it, great. They take the literature. And then I'm like, hey, by any chance, up ballot, how do you feel about Trump and Kamala? You know, and then they can share their information. I'll be like, oh, great. Okay, well, Kamala, wonderful. Here's a little bit of information on her, or maybe her poll location, things of that nature. I'll move on.
And if I may, a follow-up question, do we have on minivan that ability to say this one is leaning strongly or stay away? Good. Okay.
Yes, we do. Yeah. So if you go to a door, that person is like super hostile or like aggressive, and you're like, hey, you know, no other volunteer should go to that door. There's an option for it on minivan where you can mark it so somebody else doesn't go.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rebecca, thanks for coming back. Yeah, if you want to just finish your thought, you can go ahead.
I think I kind of finished it. I was like,
Yeah,
it was really helpful. Information and I loved. I mean, we were trained so well in Phoenix. So if anybody's doing this for the first time, I just want to say, like, Common Power has you. Like, you'll be great. And then this HH. What? Oh wait, shit! I forgot the acronym. Hi, hear, ask, mention.
mention. That's right.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, that's great.
That's right. Awesome.
Coming to Nevada. I booked the last hotel room. I'll see you at the end of the month.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you. I see Cliff, you got your hand up. Cliff Marks.
Actually,
It's not
Sid.
Cliff, it's his wife, Jenny. And
Hello.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to find the hand thing. However, I have a question. I'm concerned about getting questions about Israel and Gaza. I know what Kamala Harris said about it previously, so I'm clear on that. What is Trump's policy? Do we know?
Yeah, so Trump's policy has been quite one-sided that Israel can have whatever they want and he will not have any any stops for Netanyahu, there's the essentially red line for him, so he can do whatever he wants. That has been his kind of stance on the situation in the Middle East.
So anyone who
So
has strong Gaza views should be voting for Harris, not Trump, because that would be an even worse choice for them. Yeah.
yeah, chances are, and you can mention that, like,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Hmm.
I mean, it's not a good situation anyway, but there you go.
For
What
sure.
can I say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
To be
Thank
fair to
you.
both of them, they would like to see the whole situation wind down somehow. I think
Yeah,
Harris has
hopefully.
a better chance of finding a way.
Absolutely. Wouldn't we all?
It's
Yeah,
gonna escape
hopefully it
by
will happen. Okay. I think there are 50 folks or so still on the call. If you have any other questions, please feel free to raise your hand, mention.
just one more point on the Gaza situation. If you go to the greater good, so, are you Palestinian? Are you Israeli? Are you Trump? Are you so on? There's a greater good, which is we all want the whole thing to de-escalate and for people to find a way to a better, more peaceful recovery. So acknowledge the tragedy, find the common ground for all of us is that it all stops. And making that happen is going to be really difficult. And the person who's got the best, smarts, negotiating power, street cred on both sides, that's the person who's going to get furthest toward the common goal. Now you're talking common goal, you're not talking conflicting goals.
Yeah, that's a very good strategy, just generally on this topic or others, right? It's like trying to find that common goal. Like if people are talking about the economy, right? Like you're not going to attack them, like, well, the economy is doing so much better than other countries, right? As we mentioned, like, no, that's actually tough. Like we know that prices are higher, right? You can empathize with people. Or if they have an issue with immigration, right? Like you may disagree with the policies and everything, but you can still be like, you know what? Yeah, our immigration system is broken. Like you might have different views of how to fix it, right? But we can be like, yeah, our immigration system is a mess. How do we fix it? Well, here's a avenue that we have tried. Bipartisan didn't work out because of Trump, right? So you can try look out for those middle grounds, common grounds with people. Yeah. All right. Any other questions before we wrap up? Thank you for staying over. Really appreciate you all being here and joining and staying on the call. If
Well,
there
yeah,
are no, oh, go ahead, Dan.
Are people traveling in pairs? Is that like baseline in all the states? Because
Yes, yeah. So we stay in carpools. So every morning you're going to be in a carpool of 4 to 6 people, and then when you go to turf, to a neighborhood together, if you choose to canvas with a partner every single door, that's totally okay. But if you and your partner are like, you know what, I'm okay with this. I can go to a door, you can go to the next one, and we stay very close to each other. It's also an option. It's kind of like up to you and your partner. But definitely an option for you to go to every door if you want with a partner.
yeah, to keep each other in sight. And
Exactly.
and for those of you who are 6'4" tall males, being able to step down back on the doorstep behind a shorter woman partner makes the pair of you much more friendly.
That's
And I
right.
might speak up and do the first introduction, like I'm Dan and this is Ann, and then let Ann talk, just to de-threat my height.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah. Go ahead, Elizabeth. Was it Eliza?
Hey, as a 6 foot tall woman
Yes. Good.
who canvassed by herself for the first time, the whole time I was by myself. It was great. It was great. They gave me all the tools. I had conversations I'll always remember. And I was a salesperson for 11 years, so I had a one-up. But literally, like when I sold and with the talking points, no one brought up Gaza in Pennsylvania. And it was always economy or abortion. And if they say abortion, they're usually a Democrat. They're going to vote for Harris. What was I going to say? And yeah, stepping down off their step onto the sidewalk is like key, because then they feel like it's safe. because I can
Absolutely.
leave or they can leave really easily. But yeah,
Mhm.
I had to speak up when like it was about tall men. I was like, please.
My
Thanks.
apologies.
Right. If there are no other thoughts, questions, concerns, we can close this out. Oh, Tom, you got your hand up?
If it's one of the, I had a doorbell thing where we had a big lecture about that in another video. What's your thinking on this one, on these visits? I'm ringing the doorbell. What's my pitch?
Like the
Same
Ring doorbells or something?
phone bell kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually give a pitch, right? Quick pitch, 30 seconds, elevator pitch. Hi, I'm Pouya. Just trying to make sure you have all the information about the election coming up. Hey, these are the candidates I'm canvassing for. If you don't mind, take a look at the literature at your door. Please vote. Thank you. That's it.
Even with these Republicans and independents. Why
I
not?
think so. Yeah, because at this point, I'm like, I don't even know if they're going to listen to this. They're going to see the literature anyways, who I'm, canvassing for. Might as well just tell them who I am at the door too. So they can understand, I'm
And
being
not
respectful.
necessarily give my personal story.
Yep, because you don't have the time, it's just usually like 30 seconds or so. It's just kind of going around and you got to have a very quick 30 seconds pitch.
Thank you. I will not ask
Yep.
another question.
You're good. Dan, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, just a quick suggestion in terms of asking people how they're going to vote is if you say, what about the Senate race? Instead of saying, who are you going to vote for, which is, a little bit prying, if you say, do you have a favorite?
Yeah. Or how do you feel about the election or this,
Yeah, I mean, the idea of a favorite, it's like it's not locking them in. And I mean, it's just a little gentler way to do it. Just a suggestion.
Oh, that's very good. Yeah. And, a lot of times we can just open up with the question of like, hey, have you heard of this candidate? And if they have, and I'm like, oh, great. How do you feel about them? Right. And if they haven't, I'm like, well, this is quick 15-second pitch or who they are. I'm like, how does that sound? Does that resonate with you? Like you can just not ask people directly, who are you voting for? Yeah. That's a very good point, Dan. Thank you. Right. And any other questions, comments? If none, we can close this out. Thank you all for joining once again. We will make sure to send the recording of this. Oh,
Yeah,
Charles, you
I've
want to
got a
say something?
question,
Oh,
sir.
go ahead. Yeah.
Did David Domke show up to this at all?
Yes, it did. He was here
He
for the
did.
full hour. Yes. He had a
Okay.
lecture to go to after. So
Oh, he had another lecture to go to.
yeah, he was delivering the lecture.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. I just want to make sure he's doing his job. You
Yep.
you can never tell with this guy. You got to watch David.
Yep.
That guy. No, thanks all for joining. Pouya, you're amazing, man.
Thank you.
The depth of knowledge you have, not high level strategic outlook analysis on the political landscape, and then down to the ground level at the door expertise. I mean, you guys have the full package right now. You got it all.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Well done. Well done. All right. I hope to see everybody out in the field. I'm in Texas right now, and we had a heck of a door knocking experience out here. It's good work everywhere, all over the country. Voters are ready to come our way.
For those of you
Thanks
still
for
on
joining.
donate.
You know what? Is this still recording? All right. David's
is.
going to love that. David's going to love that. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Make your friends and family donate.
There we
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank
Pouya, great job, man. Everybody have a good night,
Thank you.
okay?
Thank you.
We'll see you in the
Have a good
field.
one. Take care, everybody.